The silence in the room wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that held its breath, like even the walls didn't know what to say. Chantel stood at the edge of their shared living room, one hand resting gently over her stomach, the other still holding the pregnancy test like it might change if she looked again. Across from her, Finn sat on the arm of the couch, his tie half loosened, dress shirt wrinkled from a long day at the office. But none of that mattered now. His posture was stiff. His jaw was locked. His eyes, those eyes she once trusted to see her, were scanning the floor like an answer might appear there. "I'm keeping the baby," she repeated, this time softer. Not because she was unsure, but because her voice needed room to carry the truth. He froze. Right there, mid-breath, like the sentence had knocked something loose inside him. His throat moved like he was about to speak, but nothing came out. That pause? That was the moment everything shifted. Not the shouting that would follow days later. Not the polite, strained conversations that tried to mask two people growing distant. Not even the final time he packed his duffel bag and folded his suits in silence. No, this was the moment it all broke. She had chosen life. He didn't know how to choose her anymore. "We had a plan," he finally said, standing now, voice calm but unsteady. This wasn't it." Chantel blinked slowly, her hand still on her stomach. "Plans change." He exhaled sharply, turning away as if the city outside their window had better answers. "I'm not ready to be a father," he whispered. Chantel's heart twisted, but her feet didn't move. Her spine straightened. Her decision had already rooted itself deeper than fear could touch. "I didn't ask you to be, but I am ready to be a mother." His head dropped. He couldn't look at her, maybe because deep down, he knew she meant every word. And so he did what so many do when they feel unprepared for love that doesn't come with conditions. He walked. He didn't slam the door. He didn't leave with cruel words. He left in silence, a silence that spoke of absence more than anger, a silence that grew louder with each day she carried life alone. 4 years later, that same silence was broken by the echo of children's laughter in the center of a sunlit Atlanta park. Finn stood frozen again, but for entirely different reasons. 3 small children raced across the grass near a fountain, giggling so loud heads turned. A woman crouched near a picnic blanket, opening juice boxes, her laughter matching theirs in rhythm and warmth. Her hair was pulled into a soft updo. She wore jeans and a peach-colored blouse that billowed in the breeze. And though her back was turned, Finn would have known that posture anywhere. Chantel. But it wasn't just her presence that stopped him cold. It was the children. One of the girls had his eyes, hazel, wide, and constantly scanning the world. The boy had his chin, slightly pointed, stubbornly proud. The other girl? She had his smile, a curve that once melted Chantel in crowded rooms and quiet kitchens. Triplets. Finn felt his breath catch, not from shock alone, but from the weight of what he had missed. He gripped the railing near the walkway, as if letting go would send him collapsing into regret. They were his. No DNA test could have convinced him more than the way those children moved, smiled, lived. And Chantel? She looked whole, radiant in a way that had nothing to do with him, like a woman who had chosen herself and kept choosing. Finn hadn't seen her in over 4 years, not since that moment, not since he left. He'd buried her memory beneath work, promotions, networking events, and short-lived relationships that never made it past surface level. But all of it, every deal he closed, every flight he boarded, every empty condo he returned to, felt meaningless now. This was his life, right there, and he had walked away from it. He took a single step forward, then another. The past had waited long enough. Before we go deeper, like this video, comment "I'm watching" if you believe real love requires real responsibility. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories like this one. Finn didn't step forward yet. He stayed where he was, half hidden by a line of trees, watching a life that had continued without his permission. The children had formed a small circle around Chantel now. One tugged at her sleeve, another leaned against her leg, the third sat cross-legged on the blanket, completely unbothered by the world. They moved with comfort, with certainty, with the kind of ease that only comes from knowing you belong somewhere. Finn felt something tighten in his chest. Not jealousy, not anger. Recognition. This wasn't a woman waiting to be rescued. This was a woman who had built something real, with no safety net, no backup plan, and no applause. And suddenly, the question he'd been avoiding for years rose up in his mind, heavy and unavoidable. What do you do when the woman you left behind becomes everything you didn't know you needed? Because Chantel wasn't frozen in the moment he abandoned. She hadn't paused her life at 26, waiting for him to come back with courage. She had grown. She had carried responsibility on her back and still managed to stand tall. Finn thought about his own life, the version of success people envied, the tailored suits, the polished conversations, the calendar filled weeks in advance. From the outside, it looked impressive. But standing there, watching Chantel wipe grass stains off one child's knees while gently correcting another's tone, Finn felt the difference between achievement and meaning for the first time. He had built a career. She had built a family. And the contrast was painful, because deep down, Finn had always believed he was being practical, responsible, smart. Walking away had felt like the logical choice at the time. He told himself he wasn't abandoning her. He was protecting both of them from a future he didn't feel prepared to handle. That lie had comforted him for years, until now. Because responsibility hadn't crushed Chantel, it had refined her. The way she spoke to the kids, with patience, firmness and warmth, told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't surviving. She was thriving. And that realization forced another question into his chest. Was he ever truly unready? Or just unwilling to grow? Finn swallowed hard. Across the park, Chantel laughed again, this time louder. One of the girls had tried to outrun her brother and tripped, only to pop back up with a grin so wide it erased the fall entirely. Finn felt the sting behind his eyes. He had missed the first words, the first steps, the late nights and early mornings, the moments that shape people long before success ever does. And now, here he was, a stranger standing on the edge of a life that once could have been his. How do you approach that? How do you apologize for absence? How do you explain fear to children who never asked to be born into it? Finn didn't know. But the question wouldn't leave him alone, because this wasn't just about regret. It was about identity, about what kind of man he had been, and what kind of man he still had the chance to become. Chantel glanced up suddenly, not at him, just around the park, but Finn's heart jumped anyway. For a split second, he wondered if she could feel his presence, like some invisible thread still connected them. Then she turned back to the kids, brushing crumbs off the blanket, calm and grounded. She hadn't been looking for him, and that hurt more than if she had, because it meant she didn't need closure from him to move forward. She had already done the work. Finn realized something else then, something quiet but sharp. If he stepped forward now, it wouldn't be to reclaim a place. It would be to request one. And that was a very different position from the one he had left with. What happens when the person you once thought you outgrew becomes the standard you now measure yourself against? What happens when success stops feeling like success the moment you see what you sacrificed to get it? Those were the questions tightening around Finn's ribs as he watched. Chantel gathered the children, helping them pack up toys and snacks. The boy, Manny he would later learn, ran ahead, shouting something about ice cream. One of the girls, Abina, rolled her eyes dramatically, hands on her hips in a way that was unmistakably Chantel. The other, McKenna, hung back, reaching for Chantel's hand without even looking. That simple gesture struck Finn harder than anything else. Trust, the kind that doesn't ask questions, the kind that grows when someone shows up again and again. Finn had never earned that. Not from them, not anymore, and maybe not from Chantel either. But standing there, watching her walk away with the children, laughing, guiding, steady, he knew one thing for certain. Ignoring the cost of his choices had been easy when he didn't have to look at them. Now, the cost had faces, names, voices, and they were walking out of his sight. Finn took a breath, then another. And finally, he stepped forward, not with confidence, not with entitlement, but with the weight of a man who understood, too late but not too late to try, that love doesn't wait for readiness. It waits for responsibility. Finn didn't expect to feel small in a city he once felt like he could own. But standing there, watching a woman he once loved more than his own comfort, surrounded by the children he never met, he didn't just feel small. He felt irrelevant. The life he had built, the power lunches, the corner office, the glowing LinkedIn endorsements, it had never asked him to be brave in the way fatherhood would have. It only asked him to perform, and he had mastered performance. Years ago, when Chantel told him she was pregnant, he'd worn calm like armor, used words like timing and goals to keep from revealing how afraid he was of the unknown, of failure, of losing control over a life he had so meticulously planned. He told himself he was being logical. He wasn't. He was being safe. And safety had cost him everything. Because what Chantel chose wasn't recklessness. It wasn't naivety. It was faith. She had believed in love that stayed, in commitment that didn't check the calendar, in becoming the kind of parent who showed up, not only when it was convenient, but when it was hard too. Finn had believed in strategy. She believed in presence. And now that presence had a name, and 3 sets of legs that ran like wildflowers chasing the sun. He rubbed his jaw clenched. This wasn't a moment he could buy his way back into. This wasn't a boardroom he could charm. This was legacy, and he had walked away from it. Across the park, Chantel zipped up a lunch tote. The kids tugged at her arms and talked over each other, their energy wrapped around her like sunlight. She didn't try to hush them. She laughed with them. There was no struggle in her posture, only rhythm. Finn remembered a time when that rhythm had centered him, when her voice on the phone could settle his worst work days, when her head on his shoulder meant peace in a world that demanded performance. He had watched her carry his world, but he hadn't stayed to help carry hers. And now, she had 3 new worlds orbiting her, the kind that required her entire soul, and she did it with a strength he could no longer take credit for. He stepped back onto the paved path, eyes locked on the woman he once shared toothbrushes and rent with. He'd spent the last 4 years chasing promotions, filling his calendar with clients and deadlines, silencing that tiny voice that whispered about Atlanta. He had everything he once said he wanted, but none of it made him feel like this. This ache in his chest wasn't just guilt, it was realization. He had chased the wrong kind of future. Success had filled his bank account, but it hadn't filled him. Because real success, the kind that rooted itself in love, in growth, in the hard work of showing up, that was standing 30 feet away, holding a juice pouch and fixing a ponytail. Chantel glanced around again, counting heads instinctively like any seasoned mother does in public. Finn felt a tremor in his gut. He remembered how much she used to love kids, how she'd talk about wanting to be the kind of mom who didn't just provide, but protected. She had become that, without him. She didn't wait for him to catch up emotionally. She built the future he was too afraid to commit to, and he had no one to blame but himself. The dilemma wasn't simple anymore. It wasn't just about reconnection, it was about accountability. He hadn't just missed the birth. He had missed the birthdays, the boo-boos, the bad dreams, the bedtime stories. He missed their entire beginning, and that wasn't something you fixed with flowers or apologies. That was something you earned, inch by inch, moment by moment, if she let him. But that was the thing about love. It doesn't owe you another chance just because you regret wasting the first. Finn's hand tightened around the strap of his laptop bag. The businessman in him whispered to retreat, to keep walking, to let the past stay buried beneath the convenience of distance. But the man in him, the one that had ignored his reflection for years, stood his ground. Because he didn't just owe Chantel an apology, he owed those children a father, not by title, but by action. And that required something he hadn't offered anyone in a long time: humility. This wasn't a reunion. This was a reckoning, and Finn Clayton was finally ready to face it. Finn never used to hesitate. In his world, decisions were made fast. deals signed over coffee, trust assumed until broken. But none of that training prepared him for this. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a doorway. And if he walked through it now, there was no guarantee what waited on the other side would welcome him. He took a shaky breath and stepped onto the grass. Every stride toward Chantel felt heavier than the last. His expensive shoes pressed into the dirt, a quiet reminder that this wasn't his domain anymore. He didn't belong in this scene, not yet. But he kept moving, not with confidence, with intention. As he approached, he saw her lift her head slightly, sensing movement. Her gaze landed on him, and for the first time in years, their eyes met. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She didn't run. She just looked, still, composed, knowing. "Finn," she said, one word, flat and steady. He almost choked on her name. It had lived in the back of his throat for years. The children paused. 3 sets of curious eyes turned toward him. No one said a word. Chantel turned her full attention back to the children and said calmly, "This is Mr. Finn. No claim. No story. Just a name." Finn cleared his throat. "Hey, hi." His voice cracked slightly. He looked at each child, stunned by how real this moment was. I was just walking through and—" "You saw us," Chantel finished. "That's all right." It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It was careful, measured. He understood instantly. She had learned how to protect peace, especially for them. A moment passed. The kids returned to their snack wrappers and coloring books, attention span brief. Finn sat on the edge of the bench across from her, unsure if he should speak or leave. His hands trembled slightly. "They're beautiful," he said quietly, eyes on the children. "They are," she replied, without hesitation. He nodded slowly. I didn't know. You weren't here," she said, not accusing, just stating. He exhaled. "That's my fault." She didn't argue. He paused, looking down at the grass. "I've thought about this moment so many times, what I'd say, how I'd explain. But the truth is, there's no speech good enough to undo what I didn't do." Chantel tilted her head slightly. "Then don't try to undo it. Just be honest." "I was scared," he admitted, "and selfish. And I told myself the timing was wrong. But it wasn't about the baby. It was about me." She didn't interrupt. He continued. "I wasn't ready then. But seeing you here, with them, I realized something. You didn't wait for ready. You became it." That made her eyes shift. "Just slightly, and I missed everything," he whispered. "Everything that mattered." He wasn't crying, but his voice cracked like someone carrying too much regret for one conversation. Chantel finally spoke, her voice lower now. "I didn't build this to prove you wrong, Finn. I built this because I had no choice. I had mouths to feed, hearts to shape, lives to protect." "I know," he said. "I can see that." She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. "You don't get to walk back in with a speech and expect space." "I don't expect anything," he replied. I want to know if I can try." She studied him. Not the way he dressed, not the way he spoke, but the way he sat, the way he carried himself now, less polished, more human. After a moment she asked quietly, "Are you asking to be in their lives, or just mine?" "I'm asking to start with theirs," he said. "If you'll let me." "And what about mine?" she asked softly. Finn's throat tightened. "That I'll earn. Not by asking, by showing." Her eyes didn't soften. But they didn't harden either. She turned back to the kids. "I won't give you promises, Finn, because I've seen how promises break. I understand. But if you show up, consistently, humbly, and without trying to rewrite the past." She paused. "Then maybe one day they'll call you more than Mr. Finn." A soft breeze passed. Chantel stood and called the kids. They gathered their things. She looked back at him once more. "You've got a lot to learn." He stood, hands open, no defense. "I'm willing," she nodded once. "Then start showing up. As he watched her walk away, surrounded by the 3 children he had once feared, Finn knew this wasn't a reunion. It was a beginning. And maybe, just maybe, he could become more than a man who left. Maybe he could become a man who came back for the right reasons. But the path ahead wouldn't be easy, because love wasn't guaranteed, forgiveness wasn't automatic, and trust had to be built, one day at a time. Can a man who once walked away prove he's worthy of a second chance, not just as a father, but as the love she deserves? The afternoon sun poured through the window of their midtown apartment, casting shadows over the neatly folded laundry on the couch. Chantel stood in the kitchen, holding the pregnancy test like it was the most fragile piece of truth she'd ever touched. Her palms were damp, her breath shallow. She stared at the tiny lines on the stick until they blurred, then cleared, then blurred again. Pregnant. She already knew it. Her body had whispered it before the test confirmed it. But confirmation had a weight that intuition didn't carry. The door opened behind her. Finn stepped in, pulling off his tie, scrolling through something on his phone. He looked tired in the way only someone who lived in meetings and calendars could be. "Long day?" she asked softly. He glanced up, distracted. "Yeah, mergers are messy. How was your class?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward him slowly, deliberately, and held out the test. Finn blinked. "What's this?" "A test." His brow furrowed. He looked down at it again. Processing, calculating, then realization. Pregnant. The word didn't leave his mouth, but it danced in his eyes like an alarm he couldn't mute. Are you sure?" "I took 2, she said gently. A pause. A long one, like the room was waiting to see what kind of man he would be. Finn stepped back and ran a hand through his hair. Silence stretched between them. "Okay," he said finally, his voice too flat to be comforting. "Okay. Just give me a second." He walked to the window, stared out at the skyline like it might offer instructions. Chantel waited. She knew fear when she saw it, but what she didn't expect was pressure. "We just moved in together," Finn started, his tone suddenly composed. Too composed. "You're still in your last semester. I'm building toward a promotion. This changes everything, Chantel." "I know it changes things," she said, heart tightening. "But it's real. It's here." He nodded quickly, too quickly. "I'm not saying you have to do anything. We need to think this through." "Think what through?" "The timing. Our options." Her chest clenched. Options. That word always sounded so polite on paper, so responsible when said out loud. She swallowed. "You mean ending it?" "I'm not saying that's what we have to do," he backtracked. "But we can't pretend this won't affect everything." Her hands fell to her sides. "It already has." Finn turned to face her. His expression wasn't cruel. It was afraid, calculating, defensive. "We had a 5-year plan," he said. "You were going to finish school. I was going to get promoted, transfer. We'd settle down after." "This is settling down," she interrupted softly. "Just not the way you wanted." His eyes darted to the test again. "We're not ready." "I am." He blinked again. The certainty in her voice scared him more than the result in her hand. That night, they didn't eat dinner. They lay in bed, back to back, both pretending to sleep. But neither could close their eyes without seeing what was coming. The next few days were a slow unraveling of what had once felt unshakable. They talked, at first, but the talking always circled the same invisible line, and they were standing on opposite sides of it. Finn had always been the man with a timeline. He tracked productivity, measured risk. Everything had a milestone, love included. To Chantel, love was something different, not chaotic, but alive, flexible, human. They had always known they were different that way, but they never expected their love to break because of it. "I just think we should wait," he said one evening, arms crossed, pacing. "Wait for what?" she asked, sitting on the edge of their bed, hand resting on her belly. This baby isn't in theory anymore. It's not a spreadsheet. It's real. I know it's real, he snapped, then sighed. That's the problem. She stood, quiet but steady. I'm not getting rid of it, Finn. He looked at her, really looked, like he was trying to find the woman who once fit neatly into his life. I thought you'd want to talk about it more. I did. No, I mean, really talk. About our future. I am talking about our future, she said. But apparently we don't see it the same way anymore. Finn sat down on the arm of the couch, fingers interlocked, eyes darting around the room. He couldn't find a landing spot. Eventually he whispered, I can't do this. She inhaled sharply, not because she didn't expect it, but because hearing it still hurt. She walked over slowly, stopped a few feet away. You're saying you're done? He didn't meet her eyes. I'm not ready to be a father. And I am, she said. Silence again. No screaming, no slamming doors, just quiet collapse. A kind of heartbreak that's too deep for theatrics. He stood, picked up his bag, moved like someone who had already made up his mind. Chantel watched him go, her arms wrapped around herself, not to shield, but to hold steady. He paused at the door. I love you, he said. She nodded. I know, but love that leaves doesn't save you. And with that, he walked out. The first few nights were the hardest, not because she missed him, but because everything felt louder without someone next to you, someone who should have stayed. Chantel packed up her life one piece at a time. She moved back to the south side, into her mama's house, where the walls had stories and the floors creaked with memory. Her mother didn't ask questions. She opened the front door with eyes full of wisdom and simply said, Come on in, baby, you home now. Chantel cried that night, not because she was weak, but because strength needs space too. Her aunties came over 2 days later, carrying pots of greens and baked chicken, sliding, slippers onto her feet, rubbing her belly like she already carried a nation inside her. You gon' be fine, her Aunt Loretta said, patting her shoulder. Ain't the first man to run when he got scared. Won't be the last. She laughed. For the first time in days, church ladies checked in. Her cousins started picking her up on Sundays, no excuses accepted. The choir's harmony felt like balm. The word hit different now. She wasn't just hearing it, she needed it. Faith wasn't just a sermon. It was the thing that kept her from falling apart when the nausea hit, when the loneliness crept in, when the future felt too big for one woman to carry. Black motherhood wasn't meant to be carried alone, and Chantel didn't. She leaned, deeply, into the arms of a community that held her without judgment. Not once did anyone say, Why'd you let him go? Because they all knew, sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is not beg someone to stay, but to choose to stay rooted in herself. By the 3rd trimester, Chantel had turned the guest room into a nursery, not out of Pinterest dreams or social media posts, but because every tiny sock folded in the drawer reminded her that love still lived here. She picked soft yellows for the walls. Her cousins painted while her nephews danced around with toy hammers, trying to help. The crib came from a church member's cousin. The rocking chair belonged to her grandmother, passed down through generations, of women who had known the burden and beauty of raising children alone. She enrolled in a free parenting class at the community center downtown. She learned how to breathe through contractions, how to change diapers, how to install car seats. She walked in each week with her head high, surrounded by other women, carrying just as much and smiling just as wide. She applied for work with flexible hours, public health organizations, community support groups, places where her degree could meet her purpose. Her belly grew. Her faith did too. She sang to the baby at night, sometimes old hymns, sometimes silly lullabies. And every time she placed her hand over her belly, she felt peace. She didn't have answers for everything, but she knew this. She wasn't waiting for anyone to come fix her story. She was writing it herself, and every chapter was grounded in the kind of love that didn't walk away. It stayed. Because she stayed. The waiting room smelled like lemon disinfectant and faint hope. Chantel sat quietly in the corner, one hand resting on her round belly, the other cradling a paper cup of water. Her third prenatal visit was supposed to be routine, just another check-in to monitor progress. But something about the way the nurse looked at her chart made her heart beat a little faster. She glanced around the room, eyes landing on a poster about twin pregnancies on the wall. She chuckled to herself. Not me. Just one heartbeat had been enough of a surprise. She didn't need multiples on top of everything else. Chantel Roberts? The tech called out. She stood, adjusted her oversized cardigan, and followed. The ultrasound room was cold, as always. She lay back, pulled her top up over her stomach, and tried to relax as the gel touched her skin. The monitor crackled to life with blurry black and white shapes. The tech, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a silver twist-out, smiled. "You been feeling extra tired lately?" Chantel nodded. "Yes. But I just thought that came with the territory." The tech narrowed her eyes at the screen and tilted the probe slightly. Chantel's chest tightened. "Everything okay?" A long pause. Then the woman looked up slowly, almost smiling but cautious. "Are you ready?" "For what?" The tech turned the screen toward her and pointed. "That's 1. That's 2. And right there, that's number 3. Chantel blinked. What? "You're having triplets, baby." The words landed like thunder in her chest. 3. She laughed. Then she cried. The tech handed her tissues, rubbing her arm gently. "You're gonna be just fine." But Chantel was already spiraling into a flood of fear and emotion she couldn't stop. As soon as the appointment ended, she walked numbly to her car, climbed into the driver's seat, and gripped the steering wheel. She didn't start the ignition. She didn't move. She just sat there, eyes staring straight ahead, until the weight of everything finally broke loose. Tears streamed down her face, hot, silent, unfiltered. She cried for the unknown, for the weight of responsibility tripled, for the man who chose not to be here, for the stretch her life was about to make without a hand to hold. "I can't do this," she whispered, but another voice inside her whispered back, "You will, because you must." By the time she reached her mother's driveway that afternoon, the shock still hadn't worn off. But black women know how to rally, and when a daughter walks through the front door with swollen eyes and a silent mouth, mothers don't need details. They get to work. That evening, her mama made sweet tea from scratch, the kind that sticks to your ribs. Her Auntie Dee lit candles and turned on old-school gospel. Her cousin Tasha rubbed Chantel's feet and said, "Don't you worry, girl, we got you." When Chantel finally said the words out loud, "It's triplets," the room went quiet. Not from fear, but from reverence, like the Lord had chosen this family for something big. The next Sunday at church, the announcement traveled faster than the choir's warm-up. By Tuesday, meals started showing up in Tupperware. By Thursday, Sister Eunice from the front pew had sewn 3 matching baby blankets with initials already embroidered. No one asked where the father was. They didn't need to. His absence didn't define her. Their love would. Her cousins organized a rotation schedule for prenatal visits, grocery runs, and emotional check-ins. The deacons' wives gave her a baby shower at the community center. Complete. With balloons, diapers, onesies, and triple the baby lotion. Some days, the support was loud. Laughter, matching shirts, dance playlists, aunties arguing over names. Other days it was quiet. Cooked meals left on the porch, texts saying "You up?" At midnight, cousins praying with her on speakerphone. But every single day, Chantel knew she wasn't doing this alone. The Black Village didn't wait for emergencies to show up. They showed up when life was forming, because that was holy too. She leaned into it. Let herself be held. Let her pride take a backseat to her belly. There was no room for ego, only room for grace. Weeks passed, then months. Finn never reached out. Not a call, not a text, not even a whisper through mutual friends. And at first, Chantel checked her phone more than she wanted to admit. Every buzz made her heart jump. Every silence made it sink deeper. But eventually, she stopped checking, stopped hoping. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. If he couldn't show up for the pregnancy, he didn't deserve the miracle it would produce. He had made his choice, and she had to live with the reality that he wouldn't be walking through that door. Not now, not when. It got hard. Not when the contractions started. Not even when the babies cried their first cries. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was understanding. Some people are not capable of being who you need, no matter how much they once loved you. And that truth, once accepted, gave her a kind of freedom she didn't expect. She stopped replaying the past, stopped questioning her worth. She started printing out affirmations and taping them to the mirror. I am more than enough. My babies are not a burden, they're my beginning. I don't need a partner to be whole. I am whole. Finn's absence was loud, but her love was louder, and she made a decision, quiet but fierce. These children would never feel like they were born into a broken story. Because this story, it was rising. Labor came earlier than expected. Chantel was only 34 weeks, and it started with a sharp cramp at 2:12 a.m. Her mother drove her to the hospital with a scarf wrapped around her rollers and gospel music playing low. At the front desk, the nurse looked up. You the triplet mama? Chantel smiled weakly. That's me. By sunrise, aunts had arrived. By mid-morning, cousins were circling the parking lot with coffee and breakfast sandwiches. By noon, the room was full of prayer. When the time came, the delivery team moved with urgency but care. The doctors kept saying stay calm, but Chantel wasn't afraid. Because she wasn't alone. Her mother held her hand. Auntie Dee rubbed her head and whispered psalms. The first cry pierced the room at 1:37 p.m. Abina, strong lungs, wide eyes, full cheeks. Then Makena at 1:39, calm, tiny fists, head full of soft curls. And finally, Manny, born at 1:42, smallest of the three, but already loud enough to lead a choir. 3 cries, 3 lives, 3 hearts wrapped in one woman's courage. They placed each baby on her chest, one after the other. She cried. Her mama cried. The nurse cried. Even the doctor wiped her eyes and said, You did it, mama. And Chantel, exhausted and trembling, looked at her children and whispered, Welcome home. She named them not from trend, but from meaning. Abina, the one who brings clarity. Makena, the one who brings abundance. Manny, the one who reminds her that joy never needed permission. And though the father wasn't there, love was, wrapped in skin, wrapped in faith, wrapped in family. They were born into a room that didn't question how, it celebrated that they were. And that was more than enough. It started with a whisper in the back of her mind, one she'd ignored for months between diaper changes, bottle warmings, and sleepless nights. You still have dreams too. The triplets were just past 1 when Chantel began browsing online job boards again. Not because she was tired of motherhood, but because something inside her needed expansion. She wasn't abandoning the title of mom. She was adding to it. Her degree in community health had waited long enough. Between nap times and church meetings, she filled out applications. She updated her resume. She took free online refresher courses, with 1 toddler in her lap and 2 fighting over a sock in the corner. One day, after an interview where she'd worn a blouse and pajama pants, she got a call back. A non-profit clinic on the east side needed a part-time community outreach assistant, someone to help with family education workshops and mobile wellness programs. The position didn't pay much, but it was something. More importantly, it was meaningful. The clinic worked with mothers like her, black women navigating food deserts, housing instability, and a healthcare system that often overlooked them. Chantel understood their language without needing a translator. She'd lived it. She showed up to her first day with her mama watching the babies, a notebook in her purse, and nerves humming beneath her skin. But the moment she stepped into the building and saw a young mother being handed formula samples and prenatal vitamins with respect, not pity, something clicked. She belonged here. Over the next 6 months, Chantel went from assistant to lead coordinator. She organized baby fairs, parent meetups, and vaccine drives. She translated medical jargon into plain language. She taught classes on breastfeeding, baby sleep schedules, and mental health for moms. Every time she stood before a group of mothers, she saw pieces of herself reflected back, and it made her stronger. At night, she still returned home to toys on the floor and half-eaten animal crackers in couch cushions. But now she returned with something else too. Fulfillment. Raising one child was a commitment. Raising 3, on her own, was a calling. Chantel lived in motion. From the time her alarm buzzed at 5:45 a.m. until the last child finally stopped negotiating for more story time, she existed in a rhythm that didn't allow for breaks. Morning routines were a battlefield. One child always lost a shoe. Another always had a different idea about what getting dressed meant. Manny liked brushing his teeth after breakfast. McKenna wanted to pick everyone's outfits. Abina insisted on saying the morning prayer herself, even if it lasted 7 minutes. Some days, the chaos made her laugh. Other days, she locked herself in the bathroom for 2 whole minutes and cried quietly into a towel. When flu season hit, it hit all 3 kids like dominoes. She missed 2 shifts at the clinic, slept upright on the couch, with 3 tiny heads curled against her chest. By the time she got them healthy again, she was fighting a fever herself, but she pushed through. There was no pause button, no backup, just her. But joy found its way in too. The kids learned to read earlier than expected. Their teachers said it was the story times, the music, the love they were surrounded with. They made messy pancake breakfasts on weekends, used way too much syrup, and piled into her bed to watch cartoons, legs and elbows everywhere. She joined a support group, just for single mothers. Every Thursday night, after the kids were asleep, she logged into the Zoom call, with a mug of peppermint tea and a sigh that said, "I'm barely hanging on." And every Thursday someone said, "Me too." They shared tips, shared failures, shared wins, no judgment, just community. Chantel stopped feeling like the only one balancing the impossible. She started realizing she was doing more than surviving. She was building, memory by memory, minute by minute. Even in exhaustion, there was joy. Even in chaos, there was beauty. Even alone, she wasn't lonely anymore. It started with a panel discussion at the library. The topic was healthcare equity for Black mothers, and Chantel had been invited as a speaker. Not just as a staff member from the clinic, but as someone with lived experience. She almost declined. Her inner voice whispered, "What do you really have to offer?" But her colleagues wouldn't let her back out, so she showed up. And when she told her story of being left, of carrying 3 lives alone, of finding strength in community, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Afterward, a young mother approached her, hand on her own belly, eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was the only one," she said. Chantel hugged her and said, "You're not, and you never will be again." That was the moment it shifted. She wasn't just doing her job anymore. She was advocating. She began writing articles for the clinic's newsletter, spearheaded a campaign to provide childcare during appointments, helped push a citywide proposal for mobile lactation consultants and maternal mental health support. People started listening, not because she was loud, but because she was real. She met with city council members, trained volunteers on bias awareness, started a weekend motherhood circle that met in the park with blankets and juice boxes and open arms. The work was hard, but it fed her soul. Because every time she sat across from a woman who thought no one could understand what she was carrying, Chantel could say, "I see you," and mean it. Her life wasn't just about diapers and doctor visits anymore. It was about creating a world where no mother felt abandoned the way she once did. That was purpose, and it was hers now. It's easy to forget yourself when you're constantly showing up for everyone else. But Chantel made a choice somewhere between year 2 and 3 to find herself again, not the version that was defined by her kids, not the one that Finn once walked away from, but the version who could look in the mirror and smile with nothing added. She started by setting boundaries, no more apologizing for saying no, no more entertaining conversations that left her drained, no more people who couldn't speak to her without questioning her worth. She rediscovered simple pleasures, reading poetry on the porch with a blanket around her shoulders, buying herself flowers because she deserved beauty, journaling at night, not to fix anything, but to hear her own voice again. The love she was growing inside herself wasn't loud, but it was firm. It said, "I am not waiting to be chosen. I am not here to prove I'm good enough. I don't need rescuing. I built the rescue plan." When people asked her if she was dating again, she'd smile and say, "I'm dating peace." And that was true, because now she could see the difference between love that needed her to shrink and love that honored her fullness. She didn't carry bitterness toward Finn anymore, but she carried lessons. One of them: never again would she welcome someone who didn't already respect the ground she walked on. Her children deserved to see her loved the way she loved them, fiercely, tenderly, without condition. And if that meant waiting, she'd wait, not with emptiness, but with wholeness. Because Chantel wasn't just a mother now, she was a woman reborn. And her story was still unfolding, on her terms. Finn Clayton didn't look back. That's what he told himself every time he stepped onto a stage to accept another award. Every time he signed a new deal. Every time someone clapped just a little too loud when his name was called in a boardroom. From the outside, it was clear he was a rising star. By 2008, he was one of the youngest regional directors at his firm. By 30, he was flying between cities: New York, LA, Houston, Chicago, his name attached to quarterly projections and executive summaries. He'd worked for it. He earned it. But somewhere in between the airport lounges and hotel keycards, Finn started, measuring his days by metrics that couldn't keep him warm at night. His apartment, penthouse level in Buckhead, had floor-to-ceiling windows, imported, furniture, a liquor cabinet that impressed guests, and silence so thick it echoed. No photos on the walls, no shoes by the door that weren't his, no trace of the life he walked away from. But he didn't talk about that. He buried it. Beneath success, beneath long hours and well-cut suits. He told himself, this is what men do. They focus, they execute, they win. He had the salary, the view, the 5-star Yelp reviews from dates who never saw him twice. But some nights, after a long day of wins and nothing to celebrate them with, he'd walk past the nursery aisle in Target, just by accident, and feel his chest tighten. Other times, the sound of a child's laughter on the street made him stop mid-step. But he never looked too long, never thought too deep, because timing, he believed, was everything. And he told himself he just hadn't been ready. Finn dated. That's what his colleagues called it, dating. They said it like it was part of the brand, like cufflinks and quarterly projections. He met women at networking mixers, charity auctions, airports, even a book launch once. They were brilliant, beautiful, accomplished. But every conversation felt like a transaction. How long have you been with your firm? What neighborhood do you live in? Where do you summer? The rhythm was always the same: drinks, polite laughter, mutual flattery. And yet, after every dinner, every smile, every night where they lingered, at his apartment door waiting for something more, Finn felt off. It wasn't about them. It was about him. Because no matter how much chemistry sizzled over dinner, none of them smelled like Sunday candles and rice steaming on a stove. None of them knew how to fold a shirt the way Chantel did, tight, neat, deliberate. None of them made him feel seen beyond his resume. They liked the surface of him, but they couldn't reach beneath it. And he couldn't give them what they deserved. So the pattern repeated, until it got exhausting. Eventually, he started cancelling more dates than he booked. His co-workers called him picky. He said he was just focused. But the truth? He'd tasted something real once. And now, even the finest champagne tasted hollow in comparison. At night, he'd lie in his bed, look at the ceiling, and wonder where she was, what she was doing, if she was okay, if the baby was born. He never Googled, never searched, because knowing the truth felt dangerous. Because what if she had moved on? What if someone else had stepped into the place he abandoned? The thought made his throat close up. So he stayed busy, But no matter how hard he tried, something always felt missing. Memory has a cruel way of showing up when your guard is down. Finn had been fine, focused, stable, until the day his assistant casually mentioned she was expecting. He froze, offered a half smile, a congratulations, but that night he sat in the dark of his condo and let the memories roll in, one after the other. Chantel's laugh during their first date, the way she danced barefoot in his kitchen, holding a wooden spoon like a microphone, the way she used to turn the porch light off during rainstorms and lean against him while they listened to thunder. He remembered the tiny plant she kept on the windowsill, the one he always forgot to water, but she never stopped nurturing. He remembered her dreams, how she wanted to open a wellness center for mothers. She'd talk about it like it already existed, and he had smiled, nodded, and talked about timing. She had lived in the now, he had been trapped in the future, and he'd thought she was the one not ready. But now, years later, sitting alone in a condo with noise-cancelling walls, he saw it clearly. She had been ready for love, for life, for motherhood. It was him who wasn't. He rubbed his eyes and exhaled. Why hadn't he called? Why hadn't he shown up? Pride? Fear? Regret? He didn't know. All he knew was that it was too late. Or at least, it felt like it. It started as a flicker, a strange dream one night, after a long work trip and one too many bourbons at the hotel bar. In the dream, he was standing in a sunlit kitchen. There were voices, high, giggling voices, and the scent of cinnamon toast in the air. He turned around. A little girl with bright eyes ran into his arms. She looked just like Chantel. Then two more kids appeared, one hiding behind a chair, the other already climbing onto the counter like it was a jungle gym. Finn reached out to catch him, but he slipped, just slightly. And Finn woke up, sweating, heart racing, arms stretched into the dark. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, he tried to forget it, blamed the bourbon, blamed the exhaustion. But the dream came again. This time, he heard the children laugh. This time, Chantel stood in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot, humming. He woke up with tears in his eyes. It haunted him, not because it was a nightmare, but because it felt like a memory he never got to make. He tried pushing it away, booked more meetings, took an extra trip, buried himself in reports. But now he couldn't unsee them, couldn't unhear the voices, couldn't pretend anymore that the child she carried didn't matter, that they didn't matter. Because if that dream meant anything at all, it meant he was being haunted by the man he could have been. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to try to find out who he still could be. The Atlanta skyline welcomed him with a strange kind of indifference. It had been years since Finn Clayton walked its streets, not since the day he packed up his old apartment and drove away from the life he didn't think he could handle. Now, he was back. Technically, it was a work trip, a conference downtown, 3 days of panel discussions, keynote speeches, and cocktail networking events where everyone smiled a little too hard. He sat through 2 meetings before realizing he couldn't breathe in the conference hall. The walls felt too close, the suits too tight, the air too artificial. So he stepped out, left his blazer behind, walked into the city with his sleeves rolled and his mind racing. He didn't know where he was headed at first. Just walked. Past food trucks, past office buildings he once dreamed of working in, past street musicians playing saxophone on Peachtree. He turned a corner near Auburn Avenue and found himself facing the edge of a large park. Trees lined the gravel walkways. Families sprawled on picnic blankets. Kids chased each other near the fountain. The sunlight filtered through branches like a silent invitation. Finn stepped inside. He hadn't meant to return here. Not consciously. But maybe the part of him he'd buried beneath deadlines and quarterly targets had never stopped remembering this place. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, eyes taking everything in. He passed a group of teenagers playing flag football, a mother pushing a stroller, a couple holding hands near the rose garden, and for a moment the pace of the city melted away. He sat on a bench near the center of the park, tilted his face toward the breeze, and exhaled. For the first time in days, the noise inside his head quieted. Until it didn't. Because just as he was beginning to feel something close to calm, he looked up, and everything changed. Across the grass, just beyond a group of laughing toddlers and a man selling lemonade, Finn saw a woman kneeling near a blanket. She was wearing jeans and a soft yellow top. Her hair was tied back in a scarf. She was laughing, tilting her head back in that way he remembered, the way that once made him believe he could stay forever. He froze. His lungs forgot how to work, because it wasn't just her. 3 children were scattered around her, all moving in that carefree chaos only siblings shared. One was trying to open a juice box. Another was inspecting bugs under a leaf. The third was talking a mile a minute, waving her hands as she explained something only children understood. Finn stood up too quickly. The world tilted for a second. He blinked hard, trying to convince himself it wasn't real, that maybe he was seeing someone else, a look-alike, a coincidence. But then the smallest girl laughed and turned toward him briefly, and it felt like getting hit in the chest. His eyes, that was his smile, his chin, all on a child who didn't know she'd just turned a man to stone. He watched as the woman, Chantel, picked up one of the kids and balanced her on her hip with ease. She looked whole, strong. She wasn't looking for him, wasn't scanning the crowd with hopeful eyes. She was living, raising, laughing. And Finn? He was a shadow on the edge of the life he chose to leave behind. He backed up a step, then stopped, because every instinct told him this was no accident. He had been brought here, not by a meeting, not by his agenda, by something far deeper. And now, standing in this park, breathing the same air as the children who shared his blood, he couldn't run anymore. He approached slowly. Every step felt like walking through a dream he wasn't sure he was allowed to enter. Chantel was tying shoelaces now, her fingers moving fast and practiced. She didn't look up until he was only a few feet away. When she did, her expression didn't falter, didn't flinch. She just looked at him, direct, composed, unreadable. "Finn," she said, his name leaving her mouth like it belonged in a different decade. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The triplets turned toward him with curiosity. One of the girls stepped closer to Chantel's side, placing a hand on her knee. "These are my kids," she said calmly. "Abena, Makena. And that's Manny." His throat dried. He nodded once, voice thick. They're incredible. They are." An awkward silence followed. The children, sensing the energy shift, pulled back toward the blanket. Chantel stayed standing, arms crossed now, not defensive, but protective. He cleared his throat. "I didn't know. I figured," she replied, tone steady. "You left before the first ultrasound." He swallowed hard. "Triplets?" "Triplets," he nodded. Slow. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," she replied. "Not right now. Just listen." So he did. She told him briefly about the day she found out, the tears in the car, the fear, the village that rose around her, the sleepless nights, the early labor, the hospital, the names. He stood there, silent, absorbing every word like it was a punishment and a privilege. "You never tried to reach out?" she asked suddenly. His head dropped. "I told myself it was better that way, that I wasn't ready, that maybe you didn't want me to." She stared at him a moment longer, then said softly, "That wasn't your choice to make alone. I know that now." She nodded once. "Good." They didn't cry. They didn't hug. It was too early for that. But something passed between them, like a door cracked open just enough to let light in. They parted with no promises, just a few more exchanged words. A hesitant smile from Manny, a last glance from Makena as she ran toward the swings. Finn walked away slowly, heart pounding, legs weak, mind racing. By the time he reached the edge of the park, he couldn't hold it anymore. He sat on a bench near the parking lot and let the weight hit him. Triplets, his children, Chantel. He had missed everything. The first steps, the first words, The birthdays, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, the late-night feedings. All of it, gone. Because of fear. Because of timing. Because he thought success mattered more than love that required him to stretch. Now, none of the victories tasted the same. He saw it all with new eyes. His penthouse felt cold. His schedule felt meaningless. His trophies felt small. Because none of it smiled like those kids. None of it glowed like Chantel did. He sat there for a long time. Eventually, he pulled out his phone, looked at his calendar, cleared the rest of his day. He didn't go back to the conference, didn't call his assistant. He just sat there, trying to figure out who he was supposed to become now. Because one thing was clear, he couldn't return to his old life. Not after this. The truth had found him in a park, and now it wouldn't let him go. 2 days passed before Finn found the courage to message her. He wrote the text in the hotel lobby, hands shaking over the keyboard. Typed, erased, typed again. Hey, I know I have no right to ask anything, but I would like to talk. Not about the past, about now, about them, about you. If that's okay. He stared at the message for 5 minutes. Hit send, then turned his phone face down and sat there with his jaw clenched and his heart hammering in his throat. She didn't reply that day, or the next. By the third morning, just as he began to tell himself maybe silence was her answer, the reply came. Thursday, 4 p.m., Roosevelt Park, by the bridge. Don't be late. Short. Clear. Still her. He arrived 20 minutes early, dressed in a plain navy sweater, jeans, and sneakers, not the polished uniform of his corporate world. No briefcase, no car service, just him. Chantel was already there, sitting on a bench, arms crossed. The triplets were playing a few yards away, throwing a ball between them and laughing so loud it echoed over the water. Thanks for coming, Finn said, walking over carefully, like the ground between them was made of glass. I'm not here for small talk, she replied. So go ahead. Say what you came to say. He inhaled deeply. I was wrong, he began. I've said it already, but I'll keep saying it. I was wrong to walk away, wrong to stay away. I thought I was doing the mature thing, choosing logic over chaos. But I wasn't being logical. I was being scared. Chantel said nothing. He continued. Now I see them. I see what I missed, and I don't want to miss another second. They're not some weekend project, Finn, she said, her voice calm but sharp. They're not a redemption story. They're people, with needs, with routines, with emotions. I know. Do you? He nodded. I'm not here to rewrite history. I want a chance. To show up. To be present. Whatever that looks like. She stared at him for a long beat. You don't get to demand space. I'm not. You don't get to skip steps. I wouldn't ask to. She looked back at the kids, then at him. Finally, she said, then we'll see. I'm not making promises. I'm not asking for them. She stood. If this is real, don't text next time. Just show up. He nodded again. And just like that, she turned and walked back toward her children, leaving him standing alone but not unwelcome. Not anymore. The next week, he showed up. Early. With no gifts, no expectations. Just himself. He waited at the school parking lot, leaning against the hood of his rental. At 3:18 p.m., the triplets came spilling out of the side gate, in a wave of other children, backpacks bouncing, voices overlapping. Manny saw him first. He stopped mid-stride, eyebrows scrunched. Abena slowed too, grabbing McKenna's hand. Chantel followed a few seconds later, clearly not surprised. He gave a small wave. She walked up, voice low. This is Mr. Finn. You remember him? The kids nodded warily. I asked him to walk with us today, she added. The walk was short, 1/2 mile back to her place, but it felt longer with silence hanging over them. Finn didn't push. He asked about school, their favorite snacks, their teacher's name. McKenna ignored him completely. Abena gave clipped answers. Manny, curious as ever, asked, Do you know how to play soccer? Finn smiled. I do. Not very well, though. The boy grinned. Chantel observed quietly, reserved, protective. When they reached the front door, Finn lingered. Chantel didn't invite him inside. She simply said, "That was fine." He nodded. "I'll be here Thursday?" "We'll see." And she closed the door. Friday, he was back, this time at the playground behind the school. He sat on the bench for 45 minutes before anyone approached him. When they did, it was Manny, holding a juice pouch. "You're back?" "I said I would be." The boy sat beside him without asking. "You got a job?" "I do." "Do you got kids?" Finn hesitated. "I'm trying to be there for some." The boy squinted at him. "That's a weird answer." Finn laughed under his breath. "Yeah, it is." Chantel watched from the path, arms folded, eyes unreadable. That night, she called him. "You're consistent. That's new." "I have to be." "You don't get to say you changed. You show me. Every day, if I have to, a beat." Then she said, "Good. Because this isn't about winning points. It's about building trust. And that takes time." He nodded to no one. "I've got time," he whispered. By week 3, he was part of the routine. He picked them up on Wednesdays, played soccer with Manny, let Abina read him entire pages from her chapter book, offered to help McKenna with her math, even though she gave him serious side-eye the whole time. He never missed a day he said he'd come, not even when it rained, not even when work pulled him to other cities. He adjusted, reprioritized, put their names in his calendar in permanent ink. Chantel remained cautious, but she watched as Finn tied shoelaces without being asked, watched as he memorized their snack preferences, watched as he stood in the living room practicing braiding techniques on a doll Abina handed him. "You're gonna mess it up," McKenna said bluntly. "I probably will," he replied. "But I'll keep trying." Abina gave instructions like a seasoned stylist. Manny offered a juice box for strength. Chantel stayed in the kitchen, pretending to clean, but her ears never missed a word. He didn't try to impress them. He just tried to understand them. And they noticed. One Thursday, Chantel found herself standing in the hallway, staring at a picture the kids had drawn. 4 stick figures, one taller than the rest. 3 kids in a row, one with curly hair, holding a soccer ball. Another, with a giant braid. One with glasses. The last figure was holding all their hands. Labeled, "Us." She held the drawing for a long time, then folded it and placed it in her journal. Something was shifting, not forced, but real. You don't just re-enter a black woman's life without meeting her circle, especially not when you left it once already. Finn didn't flinch when Chantel said, "My mama wants to see you." He put on a plain button-down and brought pound cake from a local bakery, not homemade but thoughtful. Chantel's mother opened the door and stared at him with the weight of someone who knew exactly what forgiveness cost. "You look thinner," she said. "Stress," he replied honestly. "Good." Inside, her sisters sat like a tribunal. He answered their questions. Yes, he had a job. No, he wasn't here for drama. Yes, he understood what he missed. No, he wasn't here to ask for a second chance, just a place to earn one. They didn't smile, but they didn't close the door either. After he left, Chantel's aunt said, "He didn't flinch once." Her mama added, "That boy got years of making up to do, but at least he ain't lying to himself anymore." Weeks turned to months, and Finn stayed consistent. The kids began calling him more than Mr. Finn. He didn't ask for it. It just happened. Manny said it first. "Dad, look." As he kicked a ball into the goal, he froze. Chantel froze. The moment passed. No one corrected it. Because sometimes healing comes in moments, not declarations. By the end of the 4th month, Chantel stood in her doorway and said, "You're still here." He nodded. "I'm not leaving again." This time, she believed him. Chantel didn't announce Finn's presence with fanfare. There was no dramatic reveal, no speech in the living room. She simply let it happen, as natural and unpredictable as a Texas summer storm. One day he wasn't around, and the next he just was, standing at the soccer field, waiting in the school pickup line, quiet at Sunday service. The triplets noticed. Manuel was the first to crack. At 9, he was the most inquisitive, the most outspoken. He asked the questions the others wouldn't dare. Why does that man always watch from his car? Why does he stand up when we sing the closing hymn? Why does he look like me? Malia didn't speak. She judged, watched, measured. Her silences were not empty. They were loaded. She held on to memories of nights she'd heard her mom crying softly through the walls. Malia remembered the way their door stayed closed for days after Finn walked out. She wore her memory like armor. Mariella was the sensitive one. She didn't ask questions. She just clung to Chantel, to her blanket, to routine. But that week, after school, she sat across from Finn at the ice cream shop and whispered, "You don't smile much, but I think you're trying." Finn froze. "I am." She nodded solemnly and licked her strawberry cone. That was enough. It started with Manny, always the bridge between tension and laughter, the one who wanted answers more than he feared pain. Finn took his cues from him. "Want to kick the ball around?" Finn asked one Saturday after Manny's team lost. Manny shrugged, but didn't say no. 10 minutes became an hour. They argued about who was the better striker. They practiced goal kicks and goalie dives. Finn never mentioned the word dad. Neither did Manny. But the space between them closed. The girls were different. Malia ignored him with precision. Whenever Finn spoke to her, she'd either stare blankly or walk away. Until one day, she saw him reading her favorite book, Harriet the Spy, in the bleachers during her school performance. She didn't say a word, but she left her scarf behind. The next day, it was folded on her desk, with a sticky note that said, "You were amazing on stage." Mariella's bond came in fragments. Hair-braiding disasters, a surprise visit to her ballet recital, a coloring book he bought her, all wrong colors, but with a heart drawn on the first page. She began to sit next to him at family events. No words, just presence. Bit by bit, the frost melted. The school assignment seemed innocent. Draw your family and explain what makes it special. Chantel didn't overthink it. She packed their crayons, made their lunches, and sent them off. She had no idea what was coming. Finn was invited, not by the school, but by Manny, via a post-it stuck inside his soccer cleats, "Come to class." "It's family day. Please." Finn showed up, late, nervous. He stood at the back. Manny went first. His drawing was of a soccer field with 4 figures, himself, his mom, his 2 sisters, and a tall man holding a ball. Above it he wrote, "My family is loud. We cheer. We fall. But we don't leave." Mariella's turn. She held up a drawing of a kitchen, 3 plates, 1 cup of coffee, and a man looking confused by the stove. "My family is love and learning." Malia's was last. Her voice was strong, clear. She held up a simple image, a child, a woman, and a man with his hand just reaching out. The child was looking back. Sometimes, family means forgiving someone brave enough to come back. Finn wept silently in the back of the room. Chantel turned her face so no one would see her own tears. When the class clapped, he whispered to himself, "They still see me." That night, Chantel didn't expect a knock, but she wasn't surprised when she opened the door and found Finn standing there, holding the crayon drawings like sacred scripture. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice low. They sat across the kitchen table. No distractions, no noise, just 10 years of tension coiled tightly between them. Finn took a breath. "I missed the chance to be the man you needed, and I missed out on years I'll never get back." She said nothing, just looked at him, calm, controlled, waiting. I walked away because I was scared. I thought ambition was purpose. I thought fatherhood would tie me down. But every boardroom win felt emptier. Every silent night echoed with what I lost. Chantel clenched her jaw, her hands folded tightly. "You built something powerful here," he continued, "without me. but I want to honor it now. Not fix it, not take credit, just be a man worthy of the family you raised. Her voice, when it came, was steady. You can't buy your way back. I'm not offering money, he replied. I'm offering consistency. Silence. You think that's enough? She finally asked. He held up Malia's drawing. It has to be. Because I won't stop showing up. She stared at him, heart tugged between old wounds and new hope. Chantal didn't say yes, but she didn't close the door either. The question didn't come in anger. It came on a quiet Tuesday night when the house was finally still. The triplets were asleep, spread out across the bed in Manny's room, limbs tangled, breath steady. Chantal stood in the doorway for a moment longer than usual, listening, counting breaths the way she always did when the world felt uncertain. Finn waited in the living room. He'd learned not to hover, not to assume space. He sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded, posture open. He'd already said goodnight to the kids hours earlier, left before bedtime like Chantal preferred. Tonight, though, she'd asked him to stay. That alone told him something mattered. She came in quietly and didn't sit down right away. Instead, she leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes fixed on a spot past his shoulder. "Why are you really here, Finn?" she asked. He straightened. "Because they're my children." "That's the surface answer," she replied calmly. "I'm asking about the part underneath." He didn't respond immediately. She pushed gently but firmly. "Do you love them?" she asked. "Or do you love the idea of fixing what you broke?" The room felt smaller, not tense, but heavy with truth. Finn exhaled slowly. He'd prepared for many questions. That one cut deeper. "I won't pretend guilt isn't part of it," he said finally. "It is. I wake up with it, carry it everywhere." She nodded. "Guilt can make people do impressive things for a while. I know. But guilt runs out," she continued. "And when it does, what's left?" He stood up, not defensively, just needing to move. "What's left is commitment," he said. "Not because I owe them something, but because I want to be here when it's hard, when they're angry, when they don't trust me, when they don't choose me." She watched him closely now. "I didn't come back for applause," he added. "I came back to do the work I avoided." Chantal's jaw tightened, not in resistance, but in restraint. "You need to understand something," she said quietly. "Loving them means loving them even if they never forgive you, even if they grow up and decide you came too late." "I understand." "No," she corrected gently. "You're starting to." She stepped closer. "I've watched men show up when it feels heroic," she said. "I've also watched them disappear when it becomes ordinary." "I'm not leaving," he said. She met his eyes. "You don't get to promise that. You prove it." He nodded. "Then keep watching." She held his gaze another moment, then turned toward the hallway. "We'll see," she said, and for the first time, it didn't sound like distance. It sounded like a door left unlocked. The call came at 2:13 a.m. Finn was halfway through a light sleep in his apartment when his phone lit up. Chantal calling. He answered before the second ring. "Manny's breathing isn't right," she said, voice tight but controlled. "I'm taking him to the hospital." "I'm on my way," Finn said, already grabbing his keys. "No," she replied instinctively. "I've got it. I'm still coming." She paused, just a beat. Then, "Okay." By the time he arrived, Chantal was already in triage, Manny in her arms, small chest working harder than it should. His face was pale, eyes glassy, lips trembling with effort. Finn didn't speak. He didn't panic. He stepped in behind her, hand hovering at her back, not touching, but steady. "I'm here," he said softly. The nurse moved quickly. Oxygen, monitors, calm instructions. Finn stayed silent, alert, absorbing everything. He held Manny's hand, while Chantal answered questions. He repeated medication histories without hesitation. He followed directions without needing reassurance. When Manny started to cry, frightened more than hurting, Finn leaned close. "Hey," he said quietly. "I'm right here. You hear me?" Manny nodded weakly. "Breathe with me," Finn said, inhaling slowly. Like this. He didn't leave Manny's side. Not once. Hours passed. Chantel watched him from across the room as Manny finally settled, breathing evening out under careful care. Finn didn't check his phone, didn't pace, didn't complain. He just stayed. At dawn, when the doctor explained the plan, medication, monitoring, precautions, Finn listened like a man whose entire life depended on it. Because in that moment, it did. The adrenaline wore off around sunrise. That was when Chantel finally sat down. The chair beside Manny's bed creaked as she lowered herself, exhaustion washing over her in waves. Her hands began to shake, not from fear but from release. Finn noticed immediately. He crouched beside her, careful not to startle. "You did everything right," he said quietly. She shook her head, tears filling her eyes at last. "I hate when I can't fix it." "You did fix it," he replied. "You got him here." She covered her face, shoulders folding inward. Finn hesitated only a second before placing his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. "I was so scared," she whispered. "Every time one of them struggles to breathe, I think about how close everything is, how fragile." "I know," he said, voice low, "and I should have been here for all of it." She looked at him then, really looked. "You don't get to take this pain from me," she said, "but you can share it." "I want to," he said simply. They sat there in silence, hands connected, the sound of Manny's steady breathing grounding them both. "This doesn't erase the past," she said after a while. "I know, but it matters," she added. He nodded. "I'll take that." She leaned back in her chair, eyes closed. Just for a moment. Finn stayed exactly where he was. Manny was discharged later that afternoon. By the time they got home, the sun was low, and Chantel's body felt like it weighed twice as much. The girls rushed to their brother, relief spilling out in chatter and hugs. Finn stayed back, letting the family reconnect. When the house finally quieted again, Chantel stood at the kitchen sink, staring at nothing. Finn approached slowly. "You should rest," he said. "So should you." He smiled faintly. "I will." She turned then, meeting his eyes. "You didn't disappear," she said. "Not when it counted." "I won't," he replied. "Not again." She studied him, not searching for perfection, but for truth. Then, without ceremony, she stepped closer. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was brief, gentle, and deliberate. A pause between pain and possibility. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against his chest for just a second. "This doesn't mean everything is healed," she said. "I know. But it means I'm willing to keep walking," she added. He nodded. "That's all I'll ask for." She stepped away, steady again. And Finn stood there, heart full in a quiet, grounded way he hadn't known before. This wasn't a reward. It was an invitation, and he intended to honor it. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Emmanuel Baptist Church, painting the pews in soft hues of amber and blue. Chantel's heart fluttered with nerves, not because of the sermon ahead, but because of the man walking beside her. Finn. He had traded his tailored suit for a crisp white button-down and charcoal slacks. No tie, no arrogance. Just a man showing up, humbly. "Ready?" Chantel whispered, squeezing his hand. "As I'll ever be," Finn replied, offering her a crooked smile that belied his nerves. The moment they stepped inside, whispers stirred like a breeze down the aisle. Mothers in hats turned their heads. Children peeked from behind legs. And Deacon Harris, who had baptized Chantel as a girl, paused mid-conversation with Reverend McCoy to squint toward the door. Chantel walked forward, holding her chin high. Finn followed, just behind, offering polite nods as he passed. They found seats near the front, beside Sister Lena, Chantel's childhood, Sunday school teacher, who gave her a soft elbow and a wide grin. "You brought someone new, baby girl." "I did," Chantel said, glancing at Finn. Sister Lena leaned forward to shake his hand. "Welcome to St. Emmanuel. We don't bite unless you interrupt the sermon." Finn chuckled nervously. "I'll behave, Mum." As the choir swelled into song, Finn remained quiet, observing the culture, the claps, the call and response, the shouted amens that came from the soul. It wasn't the kind of church he'd grown up around, but it felt warm, lived in, real. When Reverend McCoy took the pulpit, he spoke not from notes, but from the heart. Forgiveness ain't always clean. Sometimes it's messy. But it's powerful when you choose to show up with your whole heart. Chantel reached over and took Finn's hand. He didn't flinch or hesitate. He looked at her, really looked, and nodded. After the service, the lobby became a flood of warm greetings and cautious curiosity. Women hugged Chantel. Men gave Finn side eyes that turned to handshakes. Sister Marva pulled him into a short conversation about accountability. Reverend McCoy finally approached. His silver beard twitched as he studied Finn. "You're the one who put that crack in this child's heart, aren't you?" "Yes, sir," Finn answered, voice steady. "But I came back to learn how to fix what I broke." The Reverend's eyes narrowed, then softened. "Good. Then stay long enough to learn." Chantel stood beside him, quiet but proud. That day, Finn didn't just meet a congregation. He stepped into a community willing to watch him, but also willing to let him prove himself. The house echoed with the sounds of laughter, tiny feet, and questions that never seemed to end. "Where does milk go in the fridge, Daddy? Can we eat pancakes again, Daddy? Can we show Daddy our treehouse?" Finn froze the first time it happened. It was Davina, always the boldest, who blurted it out while handing him a crayon drawing of the family. She had drawn herself, Delilah, Devin, Mummy, and him, labeled Daddy. He blinked, unable to find words as she bounced off to chase her siblings. Chantel stood at the sink, drying her hands. She had heard it too. "You okay?" she asked gently. Finn nodded, slowly lowering into the chair as if the weight of the title had finally landed. "I just wasn't expecting it. It wasn't coached," she said. "They came up with it on their own." Later that night, as they tucked the kids in, Delilah whispered, "Good night, Daddy," while Devin clung to his leg with a quiet, "Don't go yet." Finn knelt beside them, his voice cracking. "I'm not going anywhere." Each bedtime became an emotional checkpoint. Every new daddy chipped away at the shame he carried, at the guilt for the years lost. One night, Chantel found him sitting outside their door, silent tears rolling down his face. "They trust me," he whispered. "They do," she replied, "because they see how you show up for them. Every single day." He looked at her. "I didn't grow up with this kind of love, Chantel. I didn't even know how badly I needed it until they gave it without asking for anything back." "You earned it," she said, "not with money, with presence." That night, they lay in bed, her head resting on his chest, and he whispered again, "They called me Daddy." Chantel didn't expect her mom to approve quickly. She was a woman who measured worth by action, not promises. So when she invited her over for dinner and Finn offered to cook, she braced herself. Mama Joyce arrived in a navy pantsuit, silver earrings, and the same cautious glare she'd worn since Finn re-entered their lives. Finn met her at the door. "Miss Joyce, welcome. You remembered, I like my sweet tea unsweet, right?" she asked, walking past him. "Yes, ma'am," he answered, already setting her glass down on the counter. Over dinner, she said little, choosing instead to observe how Finn served Chantel first, how he cut the kids' chicken into smaller bites, how he let Devin fall asleep on his lap without moving. When the triplets were tucked in and the dishes done, Joyce asked Chantel to step outside with her. They stood under the porch light, the scent of jasmine in the air. "I've watched you bend yourself to fit into men's expectations before," Joyce said softly. "But this you, is strong again. Mama, I'm not the girl he left behind. I found myself in that heartbreak. I won't lose her again." Joyce nodded, eyes glistening. "Then I give you my blessing, baby girl. But don't forget this. Love doesn't mean shrinking. If he's real, he'll make room for all of you." Chantel reached out and hugged her mother tight. Inside, Finn watched from the window, not intruding, just hoping he had passed one more test. That night, as Chantel returned to the warmth of his arms, she whispered, "She sees it now. She sees us. And Finn whispered back, "I'll never give her a reason to doubt me again." Finn had worked 10 years to climb to the edge of the next tier, regional VP. The offer came on a Wednesday, delivered in a sleek envelope and a congratulatory call. But it came with a cost: relocation to Seattle, weekly travel, long nights in hotels, less time at home. He read the letter twice before closing his laptop and walking out to the backyard, where Chantel was watching the kids play. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. She noticed the envelope in his hand. Her face shifted. "Is that—" He nodded. "They offered it. Regional. Everything I thought I wanted." She swallowed hard. "Congratulations. But I said no." Chantel blinked. "You what?" He looked toward the triplets. "I spent years chasing titles that couldn't hug me, couldn't fix what I lost. But they call me Daddy now. You're my home. I won't trade that again. Not even for a corner office." Tears welled in her eyes. "You sure?" "I'm sure. I'm done proving things to the world. I just want to be here. For you, for them." That night, he grilled hot dogs for dinner and played freeze tag in the yard. He helped Devin with math homework, braided Delilah's hair from a YouTube tutorial, and read Davina's favorite book using funny voices. Later, when they were alone, Chantel touched his cheek. "You sacrificed the dream." "No," Finn whispered, pulling her close. "I just finally recognized the real one." In the quiet of their room, with the moonlight casting soft shadows on their bed, they kissed, not from desperation, not from pain, but from peace. And that night, Finn knew. He wasn't missing out. He had already won. It was a Saturday morning soaked in spring air, the kind that whispered new beginnings. The kitchen buzzed with the chaos only triplets could bring: cereal spills, mismatched socks, and debates over whether superheroes could wear capes to church. Chantel was wiping down the counter, still in her satin robe, her hair tied up in a pineapple puff. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find Finn, not alone. He stood holding a single rose. Behind him were the triplets, McKenna in her glittery boots, Manny holding a box of crayons like a gift, and Abina with a folded piece of paper in her hand. "What's going on?" Chantel asked, confused, but already bracing for something big. Finn smiled, not the charming, smug grin he used to wear, but a tender, nervous kind that made her heartbeat skip. We have something to say." Abina stepped forward first. "Mommy, can you listen with your whole heart? That's what McKenna said to tell you." Chantel knelt, heart thudding. Abina opened the folded paper. It was a drawing, stick figures of the 5 of them, under a big heart-shaped sun. Above them, in colorful block letters, were the words, "Can we be your forever?" Manny took a deep breath. "We want to live with Daddy, like all the way, every night, forever, even when we get taller." McKenna added shyly, "But only if you wanted to." And then Finn cleared his throat, stepping forward. "I didn't want to ask this on one knee," he began, "because this love we're rebuilding, it's not about tradition, it's about truth, about walking upright, side by side, with these 3 miracles between us." He looked her dead in the eyes, vulnerable and steady. "Chantel, I'm not proposing just for romance. I'm proposing for restoration. For bedtime stories and school runs, for burnt pancakes and cold feet under the covers. I want to build a home with you and for them. I love you, I love them, and I'm ready to live that out daily, not someday, now. Will you marry me?" Again. This time, not alone. The room was quiet. Chantel's lips parted, but she didn't speak yet. The night settled gently over the neighborhood, stars blinking against the dark velvet sky. Chantel sat alone on the back porch, wrapped in her fleece hoodie, sipping a warm cup of hibiscus tea. The kids were asleep. Finn had gone home, giving her space to think. His words echoed in her mind, not because they were perfect, but because they were real. But real didn't erase pain. She stared at the yard where the triplets had played just hours earlier. Love wasn't her question. She had always loved Finn, even when he left, even when she hated what he did. Love had never been the issue. But was love enough this time? She asked herself silently, over and over. Would love be enough when she got tired? When he failed? When the weight of parenthood tested them again? She remembered the loneliness of being pregnant alone, the haunting memory of holding 3 babies in her arms, staring at an empty door. She remembered the way she had learned to sleep with one ear open and one eye always alert. She remembered birthdays he missed, nights of fevers with no one to lean on. But she also remembered this new Finn, the man who stayed overnight at the hospital, the man who taught Manny how to braid for his sister's dolls, the man who made space, not just for her forgiveness, but for his own growth. She wanted to say yes, but she needed to say yes from a place of wholeness, not emptiness hoping for rescue. So she whispered into the night, more to herself than anyone else. I won't say yes because I need you. I'll say yes because I'm whole now, and you're ready to join me. She didn't need to complete the sentence. She already knew her answer, but she wasn't going to say it in the backyard. She would wait until the moment felt like truth, like family. A week later, Finn picked them up with a grin too wide for normal plans. The kids were giggling in secret codes, passing notes and whispering behind hands. Where are we going? Chantel asked from the passenger seat, raising a brow. You'll see, Finn smirked, eyes on the road. It was a cabin nestled in the Georgia woods, a place that once belonged to Finn's aunt, a spot he'd never taken anyone to before. Fresh pines scented the air, and the kids were bouncing with excitement as they unloaded. Handmade decorations, streamers, paper flowers, and construction paper hearts. What is this? Chantel asked, stunned. McKenna ran up. It's your wedding day, Abena added. You didn't have one with us. Manny proudly held up his scribbled schedule. 1. Vows. 2. Cake. 3. Dance party. 4. Marshmallows. They'd drawn signs. Mommy, say yes, hung over the fireplace. Paper rings, made from foil, rested in small boxes. The kids even wore mismatched formal clothes, McKenna in a tutu, Abena in her Sunday dress, and Manny in Finn's old tie. Finn approached her, eyes misty. They planned this. I didn't ask them to. They said if I was serious I needed to show you, not tell you. Chantel was speechless. It wasn't about the ceremony. It was about them, the children who had waited for a home that finally felt whole. The man who had stopped trying to fix what was broken and instead chose to build anew. She blinked back tears. They really did all this? They did, Finn said, because they believe in love that comes back better. Chantel looked at the 3 faces, so full of hope, and realized this wasn't about repeating vows. It was about living them. The sun was sinking low behind the trees, casting a soft amber glow through the branches. Lanterns the kids made from jars and glow sticks shimmered on the porch railing. A handmade aisle, lined with flower petals from the yard, led to the wooden steps of the cabin. Chantel stepped onto that makeshift aisle in a simple white sundress and bare feet. Finn stood at the end, hands nervously clenched, surrounded by the kids who had orchestrated it all. I don't have a big speech, she said, walking slowly toward them. I don't need one. Because the truth is simple. She looked at each of her children. You are my heart, always. And I'm proud of how much we've grown, how far we've come. Then she turned to Finn. And you didn't come back to make things right. You came back to be right. This time by choice. She paused, breathing in. I'm saying yes, not because I need you to complete me, but because you've finally chosen to walk with us, as we are. Finn's eyes brimmed with tears. Manny held out a paper ring. Abena whispered. He didn't kneel, but he stood strong. McKenna giggled. You said yes. They all hugged, tangled in arms and laughter and healing. The stars came out as they danced on the porch. Marshmallows roasted. Stories were told, and no one noticed that the cake was actually a stack of frosted donuts. Because for the first time, this wasn't about the past. It was about the love that chose to stay. What would you do if someone you loved once walked away, but returned with changed hands and a changed heart? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe to Mr. Victor Storytime for more stories that heal and inspire. The warm air smelled of charcoal, lemonade, and freshly cut grass. 1 year had passed since Finn made his quiet but determined return, not with a grand gesture, but with daily effort, love, and responsibility. Now, he stood at the grill, apron slightly crooked, flipping seasoned ribs, while beads of sweat dotted his brow. Chantel watched from under a striped umbrella, sunglasses on, laughter rising. From her chest, every time Finn fumbled with the tongs like a novice. It was the same park where he first saw the triplets, a place that once held confusion and regret. Now, it held memories they were writing together. Abina darted through the open field, arms wide like wings, chasing butterflies. While shouting for Makena to help me catch the purple one, Manny was knee-deep in a fort of plastic blocks with a few cousins, already negotiating trades like a future CEO. Finn glanced over, his eyes landing softly on Chantel. He still carried guilt, but it no longer weighed him down. It had been transformed, through sweat, humility, and the grace of being allowed in again, into purpose. Their picnic table overflowed with food. Chantel's sisters were already dishing out helpings of potato salad and mac and cheese, while her mother sat in a lawn chair, fan in hand, calling out reminders for Finn not to burn the corn. "Watch that second row, baby. That's the one you keep forgetting," she warned with a smile that had grown to accept him, bit by bit. Finn grinned. "Yes, ma'am." The triplets ran back to the table, cheeks red, clothes stained with grass and joy. Manny hugged his father's leg, asking if he could help turn the sausages next. Finn handed him the tongs and steadied his tiny hands. "This one's yours," he whispered. "Let's flip it like a pro." In that moment, time paused, not in cinematic magic, but in quiet fullness. This was no longer a life of what-ifs. This was the life they chose, daily, faithfully, imperfectly, together. The ballroom in downtown Atlanta was decorated with subtle elegance, blush, and gold tones, rows of chairs filled with women from every walk of life. The projector flickered with the title, "Resilience in the Womb," stories of strength in single motherhood. Chantel stood backstage, adjusting the mic pinned to her collar. It had been a year since she'd stepped into the public space as more than a mother. Now she was a voice, a living testament to perseverance, chosen motherhood, and second chances that don't erase the first choice. When she walked out, the applause was thunderous. But it wasn't the noise that filled her heart, it was the knowing nods, the tearful smiles, the deep recognition from women who had walked similar roads. She began not with stats, but with her story. I was 28, newly in love, fresh off dreams that didn't make space for diapers. There was a soft hum of connection. I stood in a bathroom holding a test that changed my life. But the real shift didn't come from the result. It came from the moment the man I loved said he couldn't walk that road with me. Silence. I chose life. I chose all three of them. Alone, scared, but grounded in something deeper than fear. Faith. She paused, her voice strong. Single motherhood isn't just about survival, it's about foundation. Identity. It taught me how to fight and when to rest. It taught me how to love without condition, but not without boundaries. There were sniffles now. Some women held tissues. Some clutched their bellies, remembering. Chantel smiled gently. And yes, he came back. But the story doesn't end with him, because the story didn't start with him. It started with me, with a yes. With a womb willing to carry not just babies, but destiny. The standing ovation echoed long after she stepped away. Later that evening, Chantel sat across from a small circle of women who had stayed behind after the conference. They weren't there to praise her. They were there to ask, to unpack, to understand. One young woman leaned forward and asked gently, "How did you forgive him after all that time?" Chantel leaned back, her fingers wrapped around a cup of lukewarm tea. The question wasn't new, but her answer had changed over the months. "I didn't just forgive him," she said slowly. "I let him earn us," she continued. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean pick up where we left off. He didn't get a shortcut because he said sorry. He got a second chance because he showed up every day, braiding hair, helping with homework, taking criticism, learning my new rhythm, letting go of his old one. She looked up, her eyes unwavering. I told him, if you want this family, you don't get to want me without wanting them, and you don't get to want them without earning their trust. Another woman asked, didn't it hurt watching him learn what he should have known from the start? Chantel smiled. It wasn't bitter. It was whole. It did. But it healed more than it hurt, because she didn't return to him. She let him rise to her. The sun had begun to set, painting the sky in streaks of gold and plum. The family was packing up the picnic. Makena folded blankets with dramatic flair, while Manny made a game out of stacking paper plates into towers. Chantel sat on the grass, letting her legs stretch out after a long day. Abina curled beside her, resting her head on her mother's lap, her curls tickling Chantel's arm. "Mom?" she whispered. "Yeah, baby? Are you glad you didn't give up?" Her voice was quiet, but her eyes were full of meaning only a daughter could offer. Chantel paused. The breeze lifted strands of her hair, and she looked toward Finn, who was buckling a sleepy Makena into the car. She looked back at her daughter. "No, baby. I'm not glad I didn't give up." Abina frowned. "You're not." Chantel's hand brushed her daughter's cheek. "I'm glad I never gave in." "What's the difference?" Chantel smiled. "Giving up is quitting. Giving in is forgetting who you are." I remembered. Even when it was hard, I remembered. Abina nodded, as if understanding more than her age allowed. That night, as the triplets slept under one roof, safe, full, loved, Finn and Chantel sat on the porch steps. "We're not perfect," he said, eyes on the stars. "No," she replied, leaning into him. "But we're chosen." He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Every day, I choose you." And them. Over and over. Chantel closed her eyes. In a world that had tried to break her in pieces, she didn't just rebuild, she built them. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope. Comment below. Have you ever had to fight for a life worth choosing? And don't forget to subscribe to Mrs. Love Mystery Stories for more emotionally rich, real-life tales of healing, love, and redemption.